Jamal's eyes fluttered open, squinting against the harsh morning light. The hard park bench had left his back aching, a familiar discomfort in his life as a homeless person in New York City. Around him, others in similar situations were stirring, preparing for another day of survival on the streets. He sat up, observing the bustling New Yorkers rushing to work. Men in crisp suits and women in high heels hurried past, their eyes fixed on smartphones or the path ahead. None spared a glance at Jamal or his companions. In this sea of activity, he felt utterly invisible. As the morning progressed, hunger gnawed at Jamal's stomach. He made his way to a nearby alley, rummaging through a garbage can for anything edible. Suddenly, panicked screams pierced the air. Jamal's head snapped up, his body tensing. Without hesitation, he sprinted towards the source of the commotion. As he reached the lake in the park, he saw a young boy thrashing in the water, his head barely above the surface. People on the shore were shouting and pointing, but no one was taking action. Jamal didn't think twice. He kicked off his worn-out shoes and dove into the frigid water. The current was stronger than he expected, pulling at his clothes and threatening to drag him under. But Jamal was determined. He pushed forward, his arms cutting through the water with powerful strokes. Reaching the boy, Jamal grabbed him around the chest. The child, panicking, started to struggle against his rescuer. "It's okay. I've got you," Jamal reassured him, his voice steady despite the effort of keeping them both afloat. Slowly, fighting against the current, Jamal made his way back to shore. As they neared the bank, hands reached out to help them. Jamal pushed the boy towards safety before allowing himself to be pulled from the water. Gasping for air, he collapsed on the grass, his body shaking from exertion and cold. A crowd had gathered, watching in awe at the unexpected hero in their midst. The rescue quickly became a local media sensation. News vans arrived at the scene, reporters jostling for position to capture the story of the homeless hero. Jamal, still dripping and shivering, found himself thrust into the spotlight. Cameras flashed as microphones were shoved in his face, reporters eagerly seeking details of his heroic act. Amidst the chaos, a sleek black car pulled up. David Thompson, the tech magnate and father of the rescued boy, emerged. His face etched with worry and relief, he pushed through the crowd. Upon reaching Jamal, David's eyes welled with tears. He grasped Jamal's hand, his voice thick with emotion as he expressed his gratitude publicly. "You saved my son's life," David said, his words broadcast live across local channels. "I can never repay you for what you've done." Overwhelmed by the attention and David's heartfelt thanks, Jamal nodded silently. He wasn't used to being noticed, let alone praised. David, sensing Jamal's discomfort, made an unexpected offer. "Please, come stay at my home. It's the least I can do." Jamal hesitated, his eyes darting between David's earnest face and the imposing car behind him. The prospect of entering a wealthy person's home made him uneasy. He was acutely aware of his shabby appearance and the vast gulf between their worlds. Despite his reservations, Jamal found himself accepting the invitation. That evening, he sat at a table laden with more food than he'd seen in months. Crystal glasses and fine china surrounded him, a stark contrast to his usual meals scrounged from dumpsters. Other dinner guests, friends and associates of David, cast curious glances his way. Some smiled encouragingly, while others failed to hide their disdain. As the evening wore on, Jamal struggled to navigate the unfamiliar social terrain. The polite conversation and subtle etiquette were as foreign to him as the lavish surroundings. Yet, amidst his discomfort, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, he had a roof over his head and a full stomach. It was a start, however uncertain the future might be. As weeks passed, Jamal struggled to adapt to his new environment. The luxurious Thompson household was a far cry from the streets he'd called home. Despite David's welcoming attitude, Jamal often felt the weight of judgmental stares from household staff and visitors. Their whispers and sidelong glances made it clear that many viewed him as an intruder. Tyler's friends, in particular, seemed bewildered by Jamal's presence. During their visits, they'd eye him with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, their conversations faltering whenever he entered a room. Jamal tried to make himself scarce during these times, retreating to the guest room that now felt both like a sanctuary and a gilded cage. David, observant of Jamal's difficulties, took it upon himself to become a mentor. Recognizing Jamal's intelligence and drive, he introduced him to the world of technology and programming. To David's surprise and delight, Jamal showed a natural aptitude for coding. "You've got a real talent for this," David remarked one evening, watching Jamal work through a complex algorithm. Jamal felt a surge of pride at the praise, something he hadn't experienced in years. As Jamal immersed himself in his studies, excelling at each new challenge David presented, he found his mind wandering to his past more frequently. Memories of his family, long suppressed, began to surface. He remembered his mother's warm smile, his father's hearty laugh, and the series of tragic events that had torn their lives apart and eventually led him to the streets. These recollections were often accompanied by nightmares that left him gasping for air in the middle of the night. The contrast between his past life and his current situation was stark, and the weight of his trauma felt heavier in the silence of his comfortable room than it ever had on the noisy streets. Despite these internal struggles, Jamal pushed forward, driven by a determination to make the most of this unexpected opportunity. He threw himself into learning, using it as both a distraction from his painful memories and a path towards a better future. As the weeks turned into months, an unexpected friendship blossomed between Jamal and Tyler. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, the two found common ground in their shared experiences of feeling out of place in their own worlds. One evening, as they sat in Tyler's room playing video games, Tyler paused the game and turned to Jamal. "You know, sometimes I wish I wasn't David Thompson's son," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Jamal raised an eyebrow, surprised by the admission. "Why's that?" Tyler sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The pressure, you know? Everyone expects me to be this tech genius, to follow in my dad's footsteps. But what if that's not what I want?" Jamal nodded, understanding all too well the weight of others' expectations. "What do you want?" he asked. "I don't know," Tyler admitted. "That's the problem. I just know I want to figure it out for myself, not have it decided for me." As they talked, Jamal found himself opening up about his own fears and dreams. He spoke of his desire to make something of himself, to prove that his past didn't define his future. Tyler listened intently, offering words of encouragement and support. Their conversation took a more serious turn when Tyler revealed his feelings of loneliness. "Dad's always so busy," he said, his eyes downcast. "I know he loves me, but sometimes it feels like I'm just another project for him to manage." Jamal felt a pang in his chest at Tyler's words. Having grown up without a father figure, he could relate to the sense of absence Tyler described. "At least he's trying," Jamal offered, thinking of his own absent father. David, overhearing parts of their conversation, felt a mix of guilt and inspiration. Determined to bridge the gap with his son and help Jamal further, he proposed a weekend getaway for the three of them. "Just us guys," he said, away from work, school, and all the noise of the city. Both Jamal and Tyler agreed, albeit with some trepidation. As they packed for the trip, there was a sense of anticipation in the air, a feeling that this weekend might bring about changes none of them could yet imagine. The weekend getaway started on a high note. Away from the pressures of the city, Jamal found himself relaxing for the first time in months. The rustic cabin by the lake was a far cry from both the streets he once called home and the opulent Thompson residence. Here, surrounded by nature, the differences between them seemed to fade. On the second day, however, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered. A group of Tyler's school friends, having learned of their location, showed up uninvited. What was meant to be a quiet retreat suddenly turned into an impromptu party. As the newcomers settled in, Jamal felt the familiar discomfort creep back. He could sense their curious glances and hear their whispered questions about his presence. The tension came to a head during a game of touch football. In the heat of play, one of Tyler's friends, a boy named Alex, collided with Jamal. As they untangled themselves, Alex sneered, "Watch where you're going, street rat." The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Jamal froze, the old feelings of shame and anger rising within him. Before he could respond, Tyler stepped in, "That's enough, Alex," Tyler said, his voice hard. "Jamal's my friend. You don't talk to him like that." Alex scoffed, looking around at the other boys for support. "Come on, Ty. You can't be serious. He doesn't belong here, and you know it." The confrontation escalated, with Tyler defending Jamal and the other boys taking sides. Jamal, overwhelmed by the situation, slipped away unnoticed. He found himself by the lake, contemplating whether he should just leave altogether. David, alerted by the commotion, sought out Jamal. Finding him by the water's edge, David sat down beside him. "I heard what happened," he said softly. Jamal nodded, his gaze fixed on the rippling water. "Maybe Alex is right. Maybe I don't belong here." David shook his head firmly. "No, Hamad, you've earned your place here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Life will always have challenges. The question is, are you going to face them or run from them?" As the sun set over the lake, Jamal pondered David's words, feeling a newfound resolve growing within him. In the months following the weekend getaway, Jamal threw himself into his studies with renewed determination. His natural aptitude for technology, combined with David's mentorship, led to rapid progress. Soon, Jamal was excelling in a local technology program, outperforming students with years of formal education. His hard work paid off when he won first place in a regional coding competition. As Jamal stood on the stage, accepting his award, he felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. For once, he was being recognized for his abilities, not judged for his past. The victory brought a fresh wave of media attention. Local news outlets eagerly picked up the story of the former homeless man turned tech prodigy. While many reports were positive, celebrating Jamal's achievements, others took a more sensational angle. Headlines like "X Street Dweller codes his way to success," and "From park bench to programming, a rags to riches tale" plastered newspapers and websites. Jamal found himself torn between pride in his accomplishments and discomfort at the constant reminders of his past. He hadn't forgotten where he came from, but he yearned to be seen for who he was becoming, not just where he had been. As Jamal grappled with his newfound notoriety, a new challenge emerged. Rumors began circulating about irregularities in David's company finances. What started as whispers in business circles quickly grew into a full-blown scandal. One evening, Jamal overheard David on the phone, his voice tense as he discussed damage control strategies with his legal team. The conversation ended with David slamming down the phone in frustration. Jamal hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to intrude. David looked up, noticing him for the first time. "Jamal," he said, his voice weary. "I'm sorry you had to hear that. Is everything okay?" Jamal asked, already knowing the answer. David shook his head. "The company's in trouble. There are allegations. Well, let's just say things are going to get complicated." As David explained the situation, Jamal felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. The man who had given him a second chance was now facing a crisis that threatened to destroy everything he had built. Jamal knew he had to find a way to help, but the challenge seemed insurmountable. Determined to help David, Jamal dove into action. He spent sleepless nights poring over financial reports and company data, using his newly acquired coding skills to analyze patterns and inconsistencies. David, initially hesitant to involve Jamal in such a complex and potentially dangerous situation, soon realized the young man's unique perspective could be invaluable. Together, they formed an unlikely team. David's years of business experience combined with Jamal's fresh approach and technological savvy began to unravel the tangled web of financial discrepancies. However, as they dug deeper, the situation grew more complex. A former business partner of David's, Marcus Reeves, emerged as a key player in the scandal. Reeves had been quietly manipulating data and spreading false information, aiming to discredit David and take control of the company. The pressure mounted as Reeves ramped up his attacks, leaking damaging information to the press. Headlines screamed accusations of fraud and mismanagement. David's reputation, built over decades, began to crumble. Jamal, watching David struggle under the weight of these accusations, felt a mix of anger and helplessness. He knew the truth, but finding a way to prove it seemed impossible. As the crisis reached its peak, David's company called an emergency press conference to address the allegations. Moments before they were due to face the media, Jamal had an idea. "Let me speak," he said to David, his voice firm with newfound confidence. David looked skeptical. "Jamal, I appreciate the offer, but this is a delicate situation. The press will eat you alive." Jamal shook his head. "They've been telling my story for months. Now it's time I told it myself." Reluctantly, David agreed. As they stepped onto the stage, facing a sea of flashing cameras and shouted questions, Jamal took a deep breath. He stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. "My name is Jamal," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "A year ago, I was homeless on the streets of this city. Today, I stand before you to talk about second chances, about dignity, and about the man who gave me both." As Jamal spoke, weaving his personal story with the facts of the case, the room fell silent. His words, honest and direct, cut through the noise of accusations and speculation. For the first time since the scandal broke, people were listening. In the wake of the press conference, Jamal's impassioned speech bought David some time, but the crisis was far from over. As they worked tirelessly to clear David's name, Jamal stumbled upon a startling discovery. Late one night, while reviewing security footage from the company's servers, Jamal noticed something odd. One of Tyler's friends, Brian, who had been interning at the company, appeared to be accessing restricted files. It was the same Brian who had always treated Jamal with thinly veiled contempt. Digging deeper, Jamal uncovered a trail of manipulated data and leaked information, all leading back to Brian. The realization hit him hard. Brian was working with Marcus Reeves to sabotage David's company from the inside. Jamal's mind raced. He knew he had to act, but the implications were enormous. Exposing Brian meant potentially destroying Tyler's friendship and trust. Yet, staying silent would mean betraying David and everything he had done for Jamal. After a sleepless night, Jamal made his decision. He compiled all the evidence and presented it to David. "I know who's behind the leaks," he said, his voice steady despite his internal turmoil. David listened in shock as Jamal laid out the evidence against Brian. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" David asked, his face grave. Jamal nodded. "I've triple-checked everything. It's him." With the truth now in the open, they formulated a plan to confront Brian and expose the conspiracy. Jamal insisted on being the one to face Brian directly. "He's always looked down on me," Jamal explained. "He won't see me as a threat." The confrontation took place in a quiet corner of the company's office. Brian, caught off guard by Jamal's presence, sneered. "What are you doing here? Charity case." Jamal remained calm, his voice level as he replied, "I know what you've been doing, Brian, and I have proof." As Jamal laid out the evidence, he watched Brian's arrogant facade crumble. The boy who had always belittled him now looked small and scared. In that moment, Jamal realized how far he had come. He was no longer the invisible homeless man or the out-of-place guest. He had found his voice and his place in this new world. With Brian's betrayal exposed, Jamal and David moved swiftly to clear David's name and reveal the truth behind the scandal. They decided to make their stand at the company's annual gala, an event attended by industry leaders, investors, and the press. As the gala began, tension filled the air. David took the stage, his face resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I have an important announcement to make." He gestured for Jamal to join him. Together, they presented the evidence of Brian's deceit and Marcus Reeves' manipulation. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the full extent of the conspiracy was revealed. Brian, who had been smugly mingling with the guests, tried to slip away unnoticed. But Jamal, anticipating this, had positioned security at all exits. Cornered, Brian's facade of arrogance finally crumbled completely. "Why?" David asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. Brian, his face a mix of shame and defiance, spat out, "Because people like him don't deserve all this." He pointed at Jamal. "He's nobody. He should have stayed on the streets where he belongs." A hush fell over the room. Then, to everyone's surprise, Tyler stepped forward. "You're wrong, Brian," he said firmly. "Jamal has shown more integrity and courage than you ever have. He belongs here more than you do." The room erupted in applause. As security led Brian away, David turned to address the crowd once more. "Tonight, we've seen the true measure of a person," he said. "It's not where they come from, but what they do with the opportunities they're given." He placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "Jamal came to us with nothing but his courage and his character. He's now an integral part of our company and our family." The gala transformed into a celebration, not just of David's exoneration, but of Jamal's journey. As congratulations poured in, Jamal felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. Later that night, as the last guest departed, David, Tyler, and Jamal stood together, exhausted but triumphant. "You did it, Jamal," David said softly. "You saved us all." Jamal shook his head. "We did it together," he replied, finally accepting his place in this new family. In the aftermath of the gala, Jamal's life took another dramatic turn. His role in exposing the scandal and his inspiring journey from homelessness to tech prodigy caught the attention of a major tech conference. They invited him to be a keynote speaker, sharing his story of resilience and redemption. Standing on the stage, facing a sea of eager faces, Jamal took a deep breath. He began his speech, his voice growing stronger with each word. He spoke of his struggles on the streets, the fateful day he saved Tyler, and the opportunities that followed. "But this isn't just my story," Jamal said, his eyes scanning the audience. "It's a story about second chances, about looking beyond appearances, and about the power of believing in someone." As Jamal neared the end of his speech, he paused, steeling himself for what came next. "There's one more part to this story," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "A part I've never shared before." He revealed that Brian, the person who had betrayed them, wasn't just a random rich kid. He was a former classmate from Jamal's past, someone who had bullied him relentlessly in school. The same cruelty that had once driven Jamal to drop out now threatened to destroy David's company. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Jamal continued, "I'm sharing this not to vilify Brian, but to show that our past actions can have far-reaching consequences, and to prove that no matter where you come from or what you've been through, you can choose to be better." As Jamal concluded his speech, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Tears streamed down faces, and people hugged each other, moved by his words. In the days that followed, Jamal's inbox flooded with messages. Job offers poured in, but one stood out: a senior position in David's company, along with a full scholarship to complete his education. Jamal accepted both, knowing that his journey was far from over. As he looked out the window of his new office, he reflected on the twists and turns that had brought him here. From a park bench to a corner office, from invisible to inspirational, Jamal had found not just success, but redemption. And he was determined to use his position to help others find their second chances too.